Hello, seventh graders, and welcome to the first lesson in chapter 6, where we'll be discussing percents. And more specifically, today we'll be talking about how to convert between those decimals and fractions and percents, all right, using those three. Because really, they're all really just a comparison of two things. They're just different ways of writing them, all right? And I'm going to give you a few different ways on how to do that today, and hopefully one of the ways works for you, and you'll figure it out here. Okay, so starting with example 1, it says write 0.7 as a percent. All right, and one way you can do this is you can think of this as write the decimal as a fraction with a denominator of 100. Okay, because the word cent actually refers to 100. Okay, cent means 100. If you think about the word century, a century is 100 years. All right. So if I'm looking at 0.7, I see that reminder that one place value after the decimal is the tenths place. So I'll write 10 as my denominator. And how many tenths do I have? I have 7 tenths. All right. That would be the same as like 0.6 would be 6 tenths. 0.2 would be 2 tenths, and so on and so forth. All right. Another good reminder is 2 spaces after is the hundredths. So if I had like 0.37, that would be 37 hundredths, because it's the last digit is 2 places after the decimal. All right. Now I want to get 10 to 100 because percent is out of 100. So to go from 10 to 100, I multiplied by 10. So I do the same to my numerator. 7 times 10 would give me 70. So 70 out of 100. Now, since it's out of 100, our top number tells us the percentage. It's 70%. Write the numerator with the percent sign. So 70 out of 100 is 70%. Now, there's another way that you can do that, and I like this way because it's nice and fast, is to go from a decimal to a percentage. You just have to move the decimal point 2 spaces to the right. So in this example, I had 0.7, moving it the decimal 2 spots to the right. 1, 2 would be my decimal. I have to insert a 0. That'd be 70%. All right. Let's say I had 0.21. Move it 2 spots. Perfect. That's 21%. This is very similar to when you're calculating your assignment percentage on a homework. Say that we had 12 problems and you got 2 wrong. So minus 2, that would be a 10 out of a 12. A bunch of you know you take 10 and you divide it by 12, and that would give you, if you punch that in your calculator, 0.83. Well, I don't want the decimal, I want the percent. So I move it 2 spots to the right. So that would give me 83%. All right. So a couple different ways you can think about going from a decimal to a percentage. In example 2, we start with a fraction and we want to write it as a percent. So let me make a little bit more room here. But we've got 5/8, and we want to write that as a percent. So reminder that that's just the same as using division. Let's pick a new color. So use division to write the fraction as a decimal. Okay, 5 divided by 8 is, well, let's do a little math here. 5 divided by 8. Remember, the first number, the top number, numerator, goes inside the long division. 8 doesn't go into 5, so we have to bring up a decimal. Goes into 5 0 times, and then add a 0. 8 goes into 50. Let's see. 5 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract, I get 2. Bring down another imaginary 0. 8 goes into 20 twice, which is 16. Subtract, be 4. Bring down another imaginary 0. And 8 goes into 40 5 times. And then I'm done. Okay, because 8 times, I have nothing left. So that would give me, 5 divided by 8 would be 0.625. And again, from my hint up here, decimal to percent, move the decimal spot 2 places to the right. So 1, 2, to put it as a percentage. So 62.5% is that fraction as a percentage. So division will work. Getting your denominator to 100 will work. Moving your decimal place will work. Lots of different ways to calculate these is what I'm trying to get at. Now in example 3, it wants us to order from least to greatest, and I've got a bunch of different types of forms here, and I'm gonna write them all in the same form. Okay, and in the practice here, it just tells us, I like to usually do them as percents, but it says write the numbers as decimals with the same number of decimal places. Okay, so we're going to make all of these different numbers, we're going to write them all as decimals. And you'll see a few of them are already done for us. All right, the first one, 17%. Now to go from a percent to a decimal, now you have to go the opposite way. So move your decimal place to left. So it would be right here, 17.0. To left would make it 0.17, is 17%. Or if you want to say 0.17, that's the same thing. 0.25, hey, we don't have to do any work there. That's already a decimal. Perfect. 3/4. All right, you could think of this in a number of different ways. I like to think of 3/4 as quarters. If I have 4 quarters, I have $1. So that'd be 4 out of 4. I have $1. If I have 3 out of 4 quarters, I have, each quarter is worth 25 cents, 75 cents. So I'd write that as 0.75. If you didn't know that, another way you could think of it as is you're trying to get your denominator to 100 because percents are out of 100. Well, how do you go from 4 to 100? Well, you multiply by 25. And if you do the same on top, multiply by 25, you get to 75 over 100. Same thing as 0.75. Okay. Next up, 0.1 or 0.1. Perfect. It's already in decimal form. I'm going to add a 0 to the end so that I have 2 spaces after the decimal, just like I do in all of these numbers. 4/5 next. 4/5. Okay. Once again, I'm just going to get it to 10. 5 times 2 is 10. My numerator times 2 would be 8. 8 over 10 would be 80%, or 0.80. Again, because to get to 100, you multiply it by 10. Multiplying the top by 10 would be 80. Right? And then lastly, again, I'm just going to take my decimal and move it 2 to the left to go from percent to decimal. 0.20. Now you can see I've got all of my numbers written in decimal form, and it's a lot easier to compare them now that they're all in the same form. So looking at all of these decimals, which one is the least? You can think about them as money if that helps. They're all $0 and they're all just cents. So the least amount of cents would be 10 cents. from least to greatest the numbers are and write them as the original. Write them as the original numbers. So the original number was 0.1. Okay, same as up here. Next, my next smallest number looks like it's 0.17. And that was originally written as 17%. So I'm going to keep it as a percentage. Next is 20%. So that was originally written as a percentage. My next smallest, so I've got 17, I've got 10, I've got 20, would be 25, and that was written as 0.25. All right, next up would be 75 cents. Oops, I almost broke my rule there. And it was originally written as 3/4. And lastly, 4/5 is the greatest. Okay. So again, really writing these out and converting them all to the same unit, or in this case, we converted them all to decimals, was really helpful. Right? Go ahead and flip to the back side for the last example today. It says, decide whether using pencil and paper, mental math, or a calculator is most useful when solving the following problem, and then solve it. It says, if 27 out of 50 people surveyed have the newspaper delivered to their home, what percent of these people have the newspaper delivered to their home? Okay, so 27 out of 50, we can think about that as 27 is your part and 50 is your total. And think, since the denominator is a factor of 100, paper and pencil is a good choice. Or you might think about this too as mental math, depending on how good your mental math is. But you really aren't going to need to use a calculator for this. Some, I'll tell you, will be okay to use calculator on to double check. But for the most part, you shouldn't need to for these ones. So I'm thinking, okay, how can I get my denominator to 100? Well, just multiply it by 2. So if I multiply my denominator by 2, multiplying my numerator by 2, 27 times 2 would give me 54. So I'll write an equivalent fraction with the denominator of 100 is what I did. And 54 over 100, remember, you just write your numerator with the percent sign, because percent means out of 100. So 54% of people have the newspaper delivered to their home. Okay. Why don't you next go to the last 3 problems to check it out. Pause the video now, try them on your own, and then come back to see if you got them correct. All right, for the first one, this is 0.01. I want to make my decimal percent. I'll move it 2 spots to the right. I'll make it 1.0 or 1%. The second one, 9 out of 60. I'm going to use a little division. 9 divided by 60. 60 goes into 9 0 times. I need to add a decimal and an imaginary 0. 60 goes into 90 once, which is 60. I'll subtract and get 30 and bring down another imaginary 0. 60 goes into 300. Well, 6 goes into 30 5 times. Okay, so 60 times 5 would give me 300. And I'd be left with nothing. So I come up with 0.15. Moving at 2 spots will give me 15%. The last one, you need to decide if you're going to use paper, pencil, mental math, or calculator. It says 18 out of 20 dentists recommend using a certain brand of toothpaste. Well, it's going to be pretty easy here. I'd say either paper and pencil or mental math here, because you can easily get your denominator to 100 by multiplying by 5. So then if you multiply the top by 5, 18 times 5 will give you 90. 90 over 100 would be 90%. All right. That does it for lesson 1 here in chapter 6, all about percents and converting between decimals, percents, and fractions. Hope you learned something today. I will see you next time.